All right. So the JFK files dropped. The JFK files dropped, and as I expected, there were a few things in there that I guess are interesting for real history buffs, but no smoking gun, obviously. The government is not going to come out with a file drop saying we did it. Like, they're not going to come out and say that. So that would have been a smoking gun. We got no such thing. We did get, though, something that some people made a big deal about. Stu Peters tweets out the CIA requested that any mention of Israel be redacted in the JFK files. Israel is literally the only thing they're requesting to be redacted. So if we look at this was, I guess, a prior redaction in 1998. We see Israeli circled there. We'll zoom in a little closer. CIA has no objection to declassification and or release of CIA information in this document, except brackets, and that's signed August 7th, 1998. And so if we look in here, these are references to a guy named James Angleton. He worked for the CIA, and I'll show you in a minute, it's been pretty widely known for a while that he was a big-time Israel firster, as they say. And so the agency requested that certain references to his ties to Israel be taken out of the redacted files. I'm assuming this is back from the late 90s. Now, Kurt Metzger, our friend Kurt, who knows a lot more about all this stuff than Russ and I combined. This is really a passion of his, all these kinds of conspiracy theories and, forbidden histories of certain major events. Says, yeah, hardly a revelation. Trump was full of shit, as is Kash Patel and Pam Bondi. Also, we're going to war with Iran. I mean, I'm not. Good luck, kids.
Yes. You go, Kurt. You go, Kurt.
Yeah, there you go. And what he's referring to is the fact that, yes, this Angleton guy, it's been known for a while, was a very pro-Israel CIA agent. So this is a book that came out about him, The Ghost, The Secret Life of CIA Spy Master James Jesus Angleton. Interesting middle name for a guy so pro-Israel, but this guy was, made the rounds. Jefferson Worley wrote this book. This book is out there. It's been available for a while. It came out in 2017. It's available for purchase at Barnes & Noble. It's available on Amazon. In fact, the CIA itself wrote a book review of The Ghost. You can actually read their review if you'd like. You have to download a PDF. I don't know. Our audience is probably too rightfully paranoid to download a file off the CIA's website, but it is available if you want to take a look. So this is not really a secret. So once again, I mean, this is
the
really...
style evokes a young Charlotte Bronte.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There were some influencers who made a big deal over this, but as Kurt mentioned, there was really nothing much new under the sun. It had been public knowledge for a while that this Angleton guy was perhaps even more loyal to Israel than he was to the United States and worked for the CIA. And around the time of the Kennedy assassination, I'm not saying there's nothing there. Is it a little suspicious? Sure, there's a lot about the Kennedy assassination that's a little suspicious, but there was no smoking gun. Apparently, though, there was too much curiosity that had been sort of stirred among the general public for Ben Shapiro's liking. So he really does a lady doth protest too much kind of take here, coming out and saying, hey, spoiler alert, it was Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald, nothing to see here. Nothing to see here, folks.
Or so pages of the JFK Act released. It was all put together in something like 1,123 PDF documents. So people are combing through these in search of the detail, the smoking gun that shows that it was the Cubans or the Russians or the CIA or the Israelis or something.
Definitely was not the Israelis. Definitely, we didn't do it. We had nothing to do with it whatsoever. That's insane.
I'm just going to break it to you right now. It was Lee Harvey Oswald.
That's it.
Spoiler alert, it was Lee Harvey Oswald. It was always Lee Harvey Oswald. The most credible theory about Lee Harvey Oswald is that he was some sort of Soviet agent, considering that he literally went to the Soviet Union and then he came back from the Soviet Union and he was at the Cuban embassy. Other than that,
no. Marines in that era, at the height of the Cold War, were always allowed to just go to the Soviet Union and return, no questions asked.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
No, there's nothing suspicious about that at all, Ben.
No, totally acted alone.
not much is my expectation. Yeah, there are going to be some pages here of people who showed up to law enforcement and then made statements about things that they thought had happened, people that they knew, which does not constitute any real sort of evidence. There's tons of documentation on this. Again, 99% of all JFK files had already been released. You're talking about literally millions of pages of documents that have been released before. These documents are not categorized or presented in any real organized way. It's possible some of them are not really new. David Garrow, who's a historian who's written a lot about intelligence agencies, he said, this dump is profoundly more impenetrable than all the previous, more annotated ones. Tim Naftali is a historian. He said he hadn't had much luck so far. He told the New York Times, I'm trying to find stuff that's been re-reviewed and re-released with new information because some of it's unredacted. Some documents have, some have not. Historians said that they really didn't expect anything earth-shattering. So, it'll take some time to go through it. Every legit historian who has gone through the JFK files has come to the same conclusion, which is Lee Harvey Oswald did it. That is what the physics demonstrates. That is what the wounds show. That is what the tape shows. Now, all of the conspiracy theorizing around JFK, while entertaining, is, in my opinion, specious, and not just specious, in some case maliciously oriented.
Maliciously oriented against who, I wonder. Yes. Well, that was okay. So that clip was what Shapiro put out himself. But then Anomaly found another part of this rant and clipped it himself. And this went far more viral than Shapiro's clip, up to 4.4 million as of last night. Here's when he says, it was a long time ago, so who really cares who killed JFK?
I think that's become incredibly popular on the right these days. It was popular on the sort of conspiracy theorizing that's become incredibly popular on the right these days. It was popular on the left, and now it's become increasingly popular on the right. The kind of, let's just ask questions. Who really killed JFK? Wink, wink, nod, nod. And then you're like, well, do you have any evidence of the thing that you are?
Keep in mind, this guy wants to reopen the Derek Chauvin case. He wants to he wants to have Derek Chauvin pardoned, right? Yeah, exactly. All right. So if he starts out saying, hey, this kind of conspiracy theorizing used to be a feature of the left. Now it's more on the right.
Sort of conspiracy theorizing that's become incredibly popular on the right these days. It was popular on the left, and now it's become increasingly popular on the right. The kind of, let's just ask questions. Who really killed JFK? Wink, wink, nod, nod. And then you're like, well, do you have any evidence of the thing that you are presupposing? Well, no, I'm not making any accusations. I just know I don't believe the story that I'm being told. I know not to trust the authorities. Like, well, that's fine, but do you have any evidence? Evidence, not just supposition. I said, well, you're part of it, aren't you? You're part of it. The reason that you're so defensive about all this is, I don't care who killed JFK. I mean, I do, because it's really interesting, but I noticed that the calendar says 2025 and he was killed in 1963. And so my opinion about who killed JFK has about as much relevance as who killed William McKinley, or James Garfield, which is to say not an enormous amount.
I mean, that is just an incredibly ignorant thing to say, that the question of who killed JFK is as relevant as who killed McKinley or James Garfield. I mean, the killing,
assassinations that predate the intelligence state.
Well, the intelligence state, obviously, the killing of JFK is marked by a lot of people, rightfully, I think, as really the end of this country, the end of a truly democratic project. Not that democracy was perfect until then, obviously it was not. But the premise that the people had a right to influence their government through the exercise of democratic action, to me, that all kind of went away with the killing of JFK because, contrary to what Shapiro would have you believe, there were forces at work that are unaccountable to a democratic process involved
after that,
in that monumentous decision.
Well, they always got their wars.
Of course.
If you look at really what it comes down to, no American president ever again seriously challenged the military-industrial complex. Every war they wanted, they got.
Exactly. And that, in my opinion...
Johnson right after. He starts escalating in Vietnam.
Yeah. Well, that, in my opinion, is why the CIA killed him. And to me, it all started with the Bay of Pigs. They were able to trick him into greenlighting that operation trick him into believing that 1,500 Cuban exiles that were trained by the CIA could invade Cuba via the Bay of Pigs and then build a revolutionary army strong enough to topple the Cuban government on a march, whatever it was, 100 miles northwest to Havana. Just an obviously absurd plan that had no chance of working. The government had American military, both personnel and aircraft, ready to go as reinforcements once those exiles were essentially conquered, captured, or killed. And they were betting that once that plan blew up in their face, that Kennedy would have no choice but to send those reinforcements in and essentially start a ground war in Cuba. They felt he'd have no choice but to do that because the political price to pay for such a failure would be more than he would be willing to bear. But it wasn't more than he was willing to bear. He took responsibility for that failure and did not give them the war they wanted, which they clearly tried to trick him into giving them. And when he wouldn't do that for them, that, in my opinion, all this JFK stuff is speculation to a large extent. In my opinion, that was when they started talking about how the fact that this guy had to go. Because if they could not get him to give them the war they wanted, then he was too out of their control. And don't forget, they wanted to expand the war in Vietnam, which they did with him out of the way. If he hadn't been killed, he'd have been president for another 6 years. He was always in his first term. He was extremely popular. The whole history of the 60s would have been completely different, which means the whole history of the Cold War going into this post-Cold War, everything would have been different past that point had they not killed him. And so to come here and say, well, I don't really care. I mean, it's really as interesting as who killed Garfield. I mean, it's just so insane. It's such an insane thing to say. And you got some pushback here. Bro, Ben Shapiro, so you don't care that one of America's greatest presidents that was clearly assassinated by the CIA and Mossad, but you don't really think it's a big deal? Get the fuck out of here. Bro, a coup took place in 1963. Yes, it was so long ago. It's like, who cares who killed Lincoln, man? It's not like people who are still alive who witnessed it. Stop asking questions and just trust the authorities, bro. It's no big deal, bro. Trust me, bro. What a disingenuous little weasel, bro. It's not an argument of who killed JFK. It's why he was killed and who would have a vested interest in hiding the reason why. Yeah. Now, look, was his death to the benefit of Israel? Yeah, he wanted AIPAC registered as a foreign agent of the American Zionist Council, whatever it was called back then. He did believe that it would be unnecessarily dangerous for Israel to develop nuclear weapons. And so, yeah, did they have reason to want him dead? Yeah, a lot of people had reason to want him dead. That's why it's one of the great mysteries of the 20th century.
Including the
who
mob.
did it and why, including the mob. Right, there were a lot of people who had reason to want him whacked. That's what makes this a very interesting question of history. And yes, it does make it especially relevant since, in my opinion, and I think this is the mainstream opinion, you know, the prime suspect is the CIA, is the MI6. And so, of course, it's a relevant question.
Possibly and probably working with organized crime as they had been doing for a long time already by then.
Yes, exactly. So do I think that but for the Israelis, he would be alive? No, I don't think that. I think you can obviously make a case that, him being killed was a benefit to them. And it's difficult to see where American intelligence interests end and Israeli intelligence interests begin. Do I think that Israel did it per se? No, but I think the same network of entrenched, shady, warmongering forces that killed JFK are the ones who prop up Israel. And so in that sense, I do think, yeah, it's suspicious. Yeah, was Angleton a suspicious character? Yes, they're all suspicious. There was no smoking gun, but it's all suspicious. It remains an extremely relevant question, which is why a lot of MAGA was excited to get these files. And this represents a real, I mean, this has exposed itself to a degree since October 7th, and I think it will continue to expose itself. You know, Shapiro really is just a neocon conservative. I mean, he didn't even support Donald Trump in 2016. He didn't vote for Donald Trump in 2016.
Yeah, no,
he really
was
is
famously
a Johnny-come-lately.
antagonistic to him. Yeah,
Exactly. He's a Johnny-come-lately to the movement. He glommed onto the culture war antagonism because it makes a lot of coin.
right.
But he's really not one of them. He really is a very much more conventional, State Department friendly conservative influencer.
Yeah, I've been hearing. I haven't bothered to look into it. I've been seeing a lot of stuff about the wheels coming off at Daily Wire. Apparently, Jeremy Boring is out. This is part of the. I mean, this is what I've seen. I shouldn't say apparently. So, Ben Shapiro, for me, when I see people like that, this is like anti-Semitism, typhoid Mary, people like this. They are playing with fire and they don't understand it. And from following the space, I'm much more aware of it than I was at one time. This whole alliance between Zionists and MAGA is extremely uneasy. Um, I I would wager everything I have that if you really get into the comments there, a lot of those comments are going to be talking about how Shapiro is working for globalist Jews who secretly control the world.
Yeah.
When somebody like Ben Shapiro goes out there and quite clearly wants people not talking about the JFK assassination because he's afraid it might reflect on Israel, you are really feeding those flames.
Right.
It would not take anything for if, say, Donald Trump got Miriam Adelson's hand out of his ass, like that, you could get the MAGA people to flip because they don't like a lot of them. I would say a majority of them don't like that the boss is owned by Israel, and a good percentage of those really don't like Jews as a rule. All it would take would be a little switch in rhetoric, and yeah, man, they'd be coming for the Jews worse than they come for the immigrants.
Yeah, and that's what makes it such a stupid thing to say, because all you had to do there was leave it alone. Because there were really, as Kurt
just
pointed
shut up.
out,
Nobody who was running around saying, "I wonder what Ben Shapiro thinks about this."
All right, well, but also it's not like there was a bombshell in these file drops that really implicated Israel in a serious way beyond what people who have paid attention to this have already known, which is that, like, yeah, it's a little shady. There's a lot about JFK assassination that's a little shady. There was no smoking gun in these files that made it obvious that there was Israeli involvement. Therefore, you didn't have to say anything about it. You could have just shut up about it. You come up, hold up this big sign. It definitely wasn't the Israelis. Well, now you look like you're protesting too much. Now you look like you have something to hide. And he even says that. He says, now I know some people are going to say that I'm being overly defensive. Well, it's because you fucking are. It's because you are. There was nothing in the files that, came out beyond what people who were serious about looking into this already knew. Like I said, the book came out about that pro-Israel spy back in 2017. It's been, it's not common knowledge amongst the public, but there's nothing new there. There is no revelation there. There was nothing there that should have prompted him to go on a whole rant about how, no, it was Lee Harvey Oswald and him alone. That's the other thing. Like, to insist that he acted alone, A, and that B, it's not really all that important or interesting. Yeah, man. Like, you're making yourself a very suspicious figure.
Like the magic bullets.
Right.
There's nothing to see there.
No.
Nah, man. That is he's a terrible representation of Jewish people. When I see people like this, I just wish they would shut up and go away. They're putting all the people from that community in a lot of danger by feeding into these kinds of stereotypes and conspiracy theories, ironically enough.
Please clap.